Alrighty, we'll get started. Once again, welcome everyone to our first general body meeting for the NSBE Austin Professionals chapter of the year 2022. Today is January 11th, and as always, we start our meetings with the NSBE mission. Our mission, to increase the number of culturally responsible Black engineers who excel academically, succeed professionally, and positively impact the community. Our agenda for today, I will go through an event recap just from what we went through since our last general body meeting in November. So basically the end of November and December. And then we will talk through what's upcoming on the calendar for the rest of the fiscal year, which goes until the end of July. We'll have another update for our scholarship committee, just to share some information regarding that. And then we will jump into our guest speaker introduction. So excited to hear from Dr. Moore today. Greg, keep me posted if he joins before I notice, and we'll move forward.
All right, we'll do.
All right, so I always like to honor those who are on time and join on time. So we're going to do a raffle. Since we're in the virtual space, we raffle off Grubhub gift cards for those who haven't had a meal yet or may need one in the near future. So give me just a moment as I get everybody that's present into our wheel of names, and we will do a couple spins of that to see who wins. All right.
93. He received his PhD from The Ohio State University in 1998. From 1998 to 2007, he was a professor at LSU, and he has been at UT Austin since 2007. At UT Austin, he teaches a class on the Black Power movement and a signature course titled Race in the Age of Trump. In the fall semester, he teaches more than 1,000 students across both classes. He also directs study abroad programs in Cape Town, Beijing, and Dubai. Since 2013, he has taken more than 400 students abroad. He's also my friend and neighbor and brother in Christ, Dr. Leonard Moore.
Thank you. Good. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
We good? All right, I love you. I just left my daughter's game. It was the fourth quarter, 2 minutes left. It's all good though. But it's all good. But anyway, good to see everybody. So I am actually in this computer lab at Incarnate Word in San Antonio. So I want to talk about what I think of the dopest generation of Black folks, and it's the Juneteenth generation. And I sort of want to title this Juneteenth and the Birth of Black Creatives. Now, I know I got a bunch of smart MBA folks on here. So some of y'all went to MBA, got an MBA, and y'all had these case studies, right? Y'all went to MBA, y'all got these case studies. So let me give you the case study. So imagine it's 1865, and you got to come up with a strategy to help 4 million formerly enslaved people, 4 million, make a successful transition to freedom, not in Canada, but guess what? You got to help them make a successful transition to freedom in the land of their oppression, all right? So understand, if you were at Texas or wherever you got your MBA from, and that was the question, is 1865, and you got to come up with a strategy to help these folks transition from slavery to freedom. Now, they had nobody, they could go to nobody for advice. I mean, who would they talk to? No group of people had ever been in this situation before. And there was a lot of belief on behalf of white Southerners. White Southerners believed that we wouldn't be able to take care of ourselves. That was a pro-slavery justification. Well, if we free them, what will they do? They will starve. They will die of starvation because they can't take care of themselves. So when I talk about this being the dopest generation of Americans, Tom Brokaw said it was the World War II generation. Hell no. This was the dopest generation of people, period, in America, because they made this transition from slavery to freedom. So here we go. I want to take you to Savannah, Georgia. Can y'all see that? Savannah, Georgia, January 12th, 1865. This is the most important meeting in the history of Black America. General Sherman, Union Army official, the Civil War is almost over. He's in a house in Savannah. He asks a lot of Black leaders, can you come and meet with me? And General Sherman asked them one question. What is it that you all want upon emancipation? They didn't want welfare. They didn't want to live in the projects. They didn't want food stamps. They didn't want handouts. What they told him was, A, we want to be left alone because we don't think white folk will ever treat us right, number one. And number two, we just want some land. Get out of our way, give us some land, and we can take care of ourselves. This is self-determination. All right? So guess what? Out of that meeting on January 12th, 1865, 4 days later, the 40 acres and a mule legislation was passed, where Black folks between, I would say, what is now Upper North Carolina, all the way down to parts of Florida, will get a 40-acre tract of land. Even now, a lot of our grandparents and great-grandparents had tracts of land in 40 acres. So again, my point is, they didn't want any handouts. They knew that they had built this country. They knew what they were capable of. And they said, if you just get out of our way, we can take care of ourselves. Now, the first thing they do, this strategy, 1865, they're gonna do 7 things. Here we go. Number one, they're gonna leave the plantation. That is the first thing they're gonna do. So white Southerners believe that they like being on the plantation. No, the first thing they did, in many ways, to sort of mark their freedom, they left the plantation. They said, I got to get the hell out of here. And let me tell you this right now. We allow folk to use this name plantation, to name streets, to name housing developments, to name restaurants, and we don't even question it. Imagine if I lived on a street called Concentration Camp Avenue, or if there was a restaurant called the Concentration Camp. Some Black folk are so deranged, they will go to a plantation in Louisiana and have a wedding. That was the site of our oppression, where our people were bought and sold, raped and tortured and beaten, and families separated. So the first thing they did, they left the plantation, and people said, where y'all gonna go? And they said, like we say now, I don't know where I'm going, but I know I'm getting the hell up out of here. So that's the first thing they did. They left the plantation. The second thing they did, you got to follow me on this one, they reunited their families. If you think about the domestic slave trade, and that is the trading of Africans within the US, primarily between Virginia, North Carolina, the upper South, all the way down to Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas. How many of y'all heard that phrase, being sold down the river? It came from them Africans were being sold from tobacco plantations in Virginia area, in Maryland, down to the deep South with tobacco and sugar. Cotton and sugar. And what they said was nobody wanted to be sold down the river because the slavery there was brutal. And so they reunite their families. So here's what I mean by reunited families. During the domestic slave trade, you had over 1 million transactions of Africans being sold. That doesn't mean 1 million were sold. It means there were 1 million transactions because you could have been sold multiple times. So let's say my family's separated, and the only thing that I know is that my wife was sold to Jackson. So let's say I'm in Taylor, Texas, and the only thing that I know is that my wife was sold to Jackson. I may walk to Jackson, Louisiana looking for her, she ain't there. I may walk to Jackson, Mississippi looking for her, she ain't there. I may walk to Jackson, Tennessee looking for her, she ain't there. I may finally find her in Jackson, Kentucky, but guess what? She is now remarried. But you had stories of Black folk after the Civil War walking all throughout the South, not only trying to find spouses, but trying to find their children. And so they reunited their families. So when these folk talk about, oh, the Black family is broken, I say, no, y'all broke the Black family. Y'all tried to break the Black family, but you wasn't successful. So number one, they left the plantation. Number two, they reunite their families. Number three, here we go, they changed their names. Check this out. If you give me the names of the first 5 presidents, Washington, Adams, Jefferson, I think Jackson is 5, and I may be 2 Adams in there. But check this out. Those names now are Black last names. Go find me a white person with the last name Washington. Go find me a white person with the last name Jackson or with the last name Adams. So what happened after the Civil War, we had slave names, right? During slavery, we had slave names. But after the Civil War, what we did, we took on those names that were very, very popular, all right? And so when I remind people that Black folk built this country, Not only did we provide the manual labor, but the technical labor as well. You can look in the names. Most white Americans didn't come here to either they came in the 1840s in one wave, and the next wave, they came through Ellis Island in the 19 teens. All that Statue of Liberty stuff. But Black folk been here. We've been here. So this has never been a white man's country. So they changed their names and understand names were important. Now, I don't know what the hell we're doing in the community now. We naming our kids after cars and after alcohol. Come on, somebody, right? But names were important because in slavery, we had the slave master's name. So picking a name was another way they made this transition from slavery to freedom. Y'all still with me? Here we go, number 4. The fourth thing they did, they purchased land. They understood that that cotton was the centerpiece of the world economy. They knew that. They knew that the Industrial Revolution all centered around cotton, and they knew not only was it their manual labor, but their technical labor that set up these plantations. How the hell can a white man from Wales go to Louisiana and set up a sugar plantation? Or a white guy from Ireland go to Mississippi and set up a cotton plantation? They don't know what to do. Y'all ever been to Europe before? Ain't nothing there. It's cold as hell, and it ain't no natural resources. So understand they purchased land because they realized, hey, I just need some land and I can take care of myself. I laugh all the time. Black folk now want to go to Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and these other places. Wasn't it funny how we go to our grandmother's house, the food was organic back then? You go to the back, come on, Mitch, you feel me? You go to the back and they got a chicken. They go wring that chicken's neck or they kill a hog. That was organic food. And they understood if I can get a piece of land, I can build my own house, and guess what? And I can take care of myself. So that was the fourth strategy. They purchased land. Number 5, here we go. Number 5, they started schools. Do you realize that there are no public schools in the South until the 1870s? During Reconstruction, when Black folk were able to vote and hold office, one of the first things they did was pass legislation for public schools. There were no public schools in the South. You know why? Because the rich slave owners wanted to keep everybody ignorant. They kept the poor white folks ignorant. And if you're a slave owner, you want to maintain control. So what you do is you have a private tutor come to the plantation to, in many ways, educate your kids, or you send them off somewhere. But they didn't set up public schools for poor white folk and working class white people. So that Black folk established schools in the South in several states. Listen to this. It was a capital offense for a white person to teach an enslaved person how to read, meaning you could be put to death for teaching a Black person how to read, a capital offense. And so Black folk understood, well, hold on a minute. If you are passing laws to prevent me from learning, then I know it's important. So understand they established schools, and understanding nowhere in the history of our people did Black parents ever want their kids to be taught by somebody white. Never. Because to us, education has always been holistic. I'm looking at Yolanda, but I don't know you, because a Black teacher would understand, Yolanda needs this. Yolanda, how you doing? Yolanda, how's your spiritual life? We don't treat students like robots. And that's what I loved about HBCUs. So they started schools, and you got to understand how powerful this was. When the Ku Klux Klan becomes popular in the early 1870s, the first thing they do, they're going to start burning down Black schools. The biggest fear white Southerners had, it wasn't Black folk with money. It wasn't a Black person with a gun. It was Black folks who knew how to read and write and who understood the whole system. Y'all with me? Number 6, here we go. They established churches, number 6. Now, I'm going to say this. Y'all can hate on the Black church all y'all want, but if you don't go to one, keep your mouth shut, all right? Now, here's my point. The 2 institutions that have sustained Black people, HBCUs are 1, and the Black church is number 2. And the Potter's House and all that stuff, that's unique. The typical Black church in America now has less than 80 people, and the pastor is bivocational. The pastor ain't got a private jet. The pastor ain't driving a Benz. The pastor ain't getting no big love offering. The pastor may be a teacher or work at the post office full-time, and they pastor when they can. But it was important for them to establish churches, and here we go, because they understood they wanted their own religious experience. During slavery, they would be marched out to the back of the plantation. The slave owner's pastor would come and preach a message about slaves obey your masters. But these folks understood that these folks were taking the scripture completely out of context and twisting it. And they looked at the Bible as, in many ways, a liberation text as opposed to something to keep them in oppression. Now, here's the funny thing. In some places where it was too dangerous to start a school, they would start a church. But guess what they would have on Sunday morning before church started? Sunday school. Not reading the Bible, but doing reading, writing, arithmetic, and math and things of that nature, because they had to kind of be secretive about it. So that's number 6. The 7th thing they did, they started businesses. Here we go. They started businesses. Understand the entrepreneurial spirit among Black folk has always been there. You know why? Because we had to. And so when we talk about the strategies, the 7 things they did in many ways, they were the ones who got us out of slavery, and they're the ones who in many ways are our forefathers and foremothers of the Black community. And they had no guidebook. They didn't have Google. They didn't have nobody to tell them what to do. But in many ways, they had the spirit of God in them. And now look at this, 160 years later, we still here and we going strong. To show you how powerful they were, check this out. I gave you those 7 things. White folk thought we were going to die within 5 or 10 years after slavery was over. Check this out. We become so successful and so independent that white Southerners got to come up with a system to do what? To keep us dependent again. And that's when you get segregation and Jim Crow. They prevented us from voting. They implemented sharecropping to keep us perpetually in debt. You had convict leasing, where Black men and women would be charged of bogus crimes and leased out on a plantation. You had lynching and all that stuff because they were surprised at what we did within a 10-year period. And they said, we got to come up with a way to stop this. So what is the moral of this story? The moral of this is that Black people do not want handouts. We want to do for ourselves. But whenever we do for ourselves and are successful, the system wants to come in and do what? Make us dependent again. So we got to find a way to recapture this spirit of the Juneteenth generation. What does it mean to be free if you've been a slave your whole life? And I tell you this, during that Jim Crow period, them dark days, 90% of all the Black institutions we know about were established in. I'll give them to you. 85% of all of our HBCUs established during the Jim Crow period. All the major Black church denominations, what? Established during the Jim Crow period. The 8 major African-American sororities and fraternities established when? During the Jim Crow period. All the civil rights organizations, NAACP, Urban League, National Council for Negro Women, all right, all that stuff is going to be established during Jim Crow. So my point is, we have no problem taking care of ourselves, but the system does not allow us to do it. The system wants to keep us dependent on them, but we got to go back to this Juneteenth generation. And I say these are Black creatives, right? They were very, very creative because they ain't have nothing, but they had intelligence and they had something that we don't have now. I believe they had courage. They were very courageous. They didn't care what people thought about them. They said, I'm going to launch out into the deep. I'm going to go get me 40, 80 acres, and I'm going to take care of my family, and I'm going to build my community. And let the church say amen.
Amen.
Here we go.
Amen. Snapping my finger. Thank you so much, Dr. Moore.
Let me know if y'all got any questions at all.
We definitely got some questions. So,
okay, I'm here.
So my question always is, there's always the complaint, or at least we say the words, where are the Martin Luther King, Jesse Jacksons, the John Lewises of today? Who would you deem, and I know this is a big criteria for you, who would you deem to be some of the civil rights leaders of today?
And here's what I got to remind people. When we talk about civil rights leaders, understand they didn't wake up one day and start calling themselves a civil rights leader. All those people we talked about just operated in their local community. And that's what it has always been about. It ain't about looking for a leader, because what works in Austin may not work in Dallas. It may not work in Jackson, Mississippi. It may not work in Charlotte. And so I think white America has told us, well, who is y'all leader? Hell, we ain't got one. But I think what happens is you get leaders who operating in their local area. And my thing is this, all politics should be local. All of them should be local. All right. So I hope that answers your question, Harrington. But we all just need to operate in our own domain. And here's what I mean. You won't see me trying to make beats and make a hip hop album. You're not going to find me trying to open a restaurant. I do one thing. I teach Black history, and that is what I do. And I think I do it pretty good. And that is what I bring to the table. The Bible talks about coveting other people's gifts. No, what has God put into you? I'm looking at Dee Dee. Dee Dee is a connector. She's community oriented. That is her ministry. And so we got to stop coveting other people's stuff and be like, I want to be like them. It's like, no, how the scripture says, God, Lee, so much. But but before you were formed in the womb, I knew you. And I've realized that, we are wonderfully made, and we're uniquely made, and we just can't be scared, and we got to walk in it.
I love that. So I guess being in the Austin community, what do you see as some of the quote unquote things that we as an organization, not as an organization, but as a community, could use, especially as it relates to, I guess, the growth of our community?
Let me give an example. I did something real radical about 10, 12 years ago with some UT students. We took a tour of pre-gentrified East Austin, all right, before all the Black folk got pushed out. And before we got out of the van, I said, okay, let's write down what you think their issues are. And I did that because middle-class Black folk, we got this arrogance that we think we know what poor people need, right? We impose upon them what we think they need. And so they wrote it down. They said more after-school opportunities, jobs, grocery store, all that kind of stuff. You know what the number one need was in that community after we knocked on the doors? They wanted speed bumps in the street. You know why? Because during rush hour in the morning and the evening, guess what? Their heads were getting hit by cars from people flying into downtown and flying away from downtown. And the point is, if you don't live there, you don't know. So the best thing we can do for folks is ask a simple question. Here we go now. Educated Black folk got to ask Black folk who struggle one question: what can I help you fight for? But we don't do it. We have this missionary complex, right? I'm gonna bring you some clothes. Hell, I ain't asked for no clothes, right? So we just got to have that mentality.
I love it. Awesome. Well, if there are no other questions, we will let Dr. Moore get back to his daughter's basketball game. Well, it's over now, and hopefully they won.
They lost by 5, but it's all good. But thank y'all. This was a lot of. Any other questions at all? I got a couple more minutes.
What do you think about institutional transformation? Because, like, if I were going to add something to your list, we transform institutions. We basically outcompeted the white institutions. I mean, we took some plantations and turned them into institutions of higher learning. We turned them into institutions of spiritual enrichment.
Let me say this. I was in a diversity role at Texas, been a professor, but VP of diversity for 4 years. You know what I realized? Those institutions don't want to be transformed. Dale don't want to be transformed. And so you got people stressing themselves out. Y'all need to hire more Black folk. If I got a bunch of white CEOs in a room and we went to a happy hour and I got a couple drinks in them, and if I just asked them, hey man, what y'all think about all this diversity stuff? You know what they would say? We really don't care about it. We don't. And so we stress ourselves out. We get upset. We don't get promoted and don't get a raise. You know how many times I saw my white colleagues who not qualified just get jobs handed to them? And so we got to quit playing that game. I'm going to do my stuff at Dell or IBM, but I'm going to do my other stuff on the side. But the institutions aren't set up to change. They have no desire to change. And we are foolish to think that they do. I saw something real quick and I'll be quiet. I'll let you go. One of these big consulting companies, it wasn't Deloitte. It was a big one. I went to their website. First thing it said was, by 2030, listen to this, by 2027, listen to this. We want half of our workforce to be female, right? That was widely celebrated.
Yeah, a lot of people are using that.
But if you substitute Black for female, they would catch hell for it. And what we have done, we have allowed them to use this talk of diversity, which don't even mean Black folk anymore. So when you are engaging with leadership of your corporation, ask a simple question: what are we doing for Black folks? And I don't care if they gay, Black folk, they transgender, I don't care how they use the bathroom or who they want to get in the bed with. What are you doing for Black people? And see how the discussion goes. They're going to try to deflect and talk about a whole bunch of other stuff and say, no, what are we doing for Black folk?
I love
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
All right? Hope I ain't too radical for y'all, but y'all them STEM Negroes, y'all need some of this.
Look, we welcome it, brother. Welcome it.
Let me tell this quick story, man. I spoke at Applied Materials. Listen to this real quick. Give me 30 seconds. Now, Applied Materials invited me to speak, all right? It was a Black group. They invited me to speak for Black History Month. Mm-hmm. Man, I left out of there. Nobody clapped. Nobody said thank you. They ain't even walked me to the car. And I said, y'all Negroes over here are completely lost, but we gotta be more courageous and brave. All right. Have a good evening. Thank y'all.
All right.
Thank you so much, brother. We appreciate it so much, man. And this is exactly what we were hoping for, delivered on it. And I apologize for having to step out on that last.
No, it was good.
2 minutes.
You know, it's funny. I got these computer lab workers in here. I know they like, man, who is this Negro up in here? But it's all good.
They need to hear it too. How
That's
about
right.
that?
Y'all take care.
All right. Thank you, brother. Awesome. So we will continue. And I didn't get to mention this because I wanted to allow as much time for Dr. Moore to speak. But we're going through this fiscal year, using the principles of Kwanzaa as our kind of theme and topic for each of our general body meetings. So last November we had Kuumba, which was creativity, and this year this meeting today was Kujichagulia, self-determination. So we're looking to find speakers that tie into those principles and just kind of remind us of what we can do as a collective community for Black and focusing on that culturally responsible part of our mission. Apologize.